You are listening to Lovely Talks Heavy. Hello everybody, and welcome to Lovely Talks Heavy. I am your host, Lovely, and I discuss everything I enjoy with regard to heavy music. Let us discuss getting to know our favorite musicians through Q&A settings. No, particularly, I have grown to hate Q&As. Not to say that as a young fan, I didn't sit in live chats waiting with bated breath to see if a band was going to respond to one of my questions. Spoiler alert, 90% of the time, they didn't. And not to say that it's inherently bad that musicians will take time out of their day to share something about themselves to connect with fans. It allows them to show their more human side that we as fans tend to forget. And therein lies the root of my hatred of Q&As. We as fans tend to see the musician's work as a reflection of their humanity rather than an extension of it. Of course, there are pieces of their soul that musicians absolutely put into their music, but there are other thoughts and feelings and interests and ideas that they have outside of their music. The music is the one part of a musician's life that we as fans spend the most time with. And so we can only connect to these people most often by listening to this music. A few weeks ago on Facebook, at the time of this recording, I should say, Zachy Vengeance, the rhythm guitarist for Avenged Sevenfold, did a Q&A. Naturally, since he's part of one of the biggest bands in the world, this got a lot of attention from fans, and literally thousands of questions were submitted into that Q&A. Now, of course, there will be a lot of fans who are excited at the prospect of getting to know their favorite artist just a bit more. And that's where things start to get a bit hairy. I've had friends who are considered, quote, internet famous, unquote, who have made appearances at conventions or what have you. And as their popularity grew, so did the demand from their fans to spend a bit more time and get a little bit more attention from them. Because we primarily connect with these people that we adore through their work, the human elements, the human and soulful elements that are present in that work, we might think that these people are like family or friends to us. They communicated something meaningful to us, and we want to communicate something meaningful back. The issue becomes, however, that our communication with these musicians is very asymmetrical in a Q&A setting or just through their music. But think of it like a filtered funnel in the case of a Q&A setting. We're coming in through the large open end, and the musician, or musicians I should say, are on the skinny end, responding to questions and declarations that they can comprehend or that grabs their attention. The more novel-length declarations and inquiries that we submit, the more they get muddled in with other questions, thoughts, and, unfortunately, comments from rude trolls. The Zachy Vengeance Facebook Q&A gave me the inspiration to do this episode, and to give a little bit of advice for etiquette on the fan side when it comes to Q&As, whether it takes place in an online forum or a real-life setting. Now, just a note, this is Lovely Talks Heavy, so I'm thinking primarily of Q&As with heavy metal bands or something like that. However, this advice can be applied to other situations that aren't heavy metal bands. So if you're listening and you're not a metal fan, you might be able to use this advice or share it with somebody else. So, let's get started, shall we? Number 1. Don't spend a long time asking a question. The musician only has a limited amount of time to answer, and the longer they spend answering your one query or queries, the less opportunity other people will have to have their questions answered. The focus isn't going to be on you, and it shouldn't be on you. It's about the musician. Number 2. Refrain from asking about something that could easily be found on the person's Wikipedia page. Now, I say refrain because it would be ridiculous to expect everybody to know everything. Maybe, for instance, you just got into this band and you're super excited and you haven't spent 1,000 years watching interviews, and that's completely fine. If you really want to ask a question and have some ideas in mind for what you want to ask, and you have some time before the Q&A, I encourage you to do some quick research. This will help you in deciding what in particular you want to ask, because maybe you have a handful of questions, 2 or 3 different ideas of what you want to ask, and that's perfectly fine. Doing a quick bit of research will help you hone in on what in particular you want to ask, and it will help you create an interesting query that the person will be more likely to answer. Don't worry about if the person answered this one particular question once 1,000,000 years ago on an obscure interview that 5 people have watched or something, I don't know. If that's the case, go ahead and ask the question again. That's totally fine. But rule of thumb, if it's on the Wikipedia page, don't worry about asking it. Number 3. Don't get mad or upset if you don't get called upon to ask your question. Your question will not be the only one that matters. It's not the only one that matters, nor is it the most important one in the world. The Q&A isn't a contest to see exactly which of the fans will get acknowledged. It's meant for the musician to spend a little time sharing themselves with the fans. Now, of course, it is exciting to get called upon and have that moment, that shared moment with the musician. But again, if you don't have that in that Q&A, don't get upset. If you want so terribly to ask your question, hold on to it, because there surely will be other opportunities to do so. Number 4. If you're in a real life situation, a live Q&A sort of audience situation, if staff start to get a bit short with you, don't get mad at them for doing their job. If one person starts to get out of line, whether it be just pushing against the velvet rope boundaries or something, just a little bit, then it's the staff's job to make sure everybody knows that it's not okay. It does not matter how much you, one individual, spent to have the experience at that location or what have you. So did the other people there. You know, it's no reason for you to act like you own the place or get out of line. And even if you haven't done anything wrong, again, just don't get mad at them. They're doing their job. And if you know you're not doing anything wrong, then you know that when the staff are yelling, it won't apply to you. Number 5. This should be an easy one for some people, but it should bear mentioning in this episode. Don't be rude to the musician or to other fans, point blank. Now, this little anecdote is not in regard to heavy metal, but it's a fun little example that I want to bring up that I feel is relevant. So, a while back at RuPaul's Drag Con, there was a panel for the drag queens Trixie Mattel and Katya Zamolotcheva. I don't think I pronounced that right, but I have a hard time. Katya Zamo, we'll say that. they have a popular web series on YouTube called where they just basically talk for like 10 minutes about random topics that they're given, and people just eat that up, myself included. So they filmed the panel that they had at RuPaul's Drag Con, and when it came to the Q&A portion, there was only 15 minutes for a Q&A portion of a hour-long panel. And one fan in particular, this was cut out of the video when it was posted on YouTube. Thank God, I would not have been able to handle that. But someone decided to come up when they got called upon and read aloud some explicit fan fiction featuring the two drag queens that were hosting the panel. At first, this girl, I assume it's a girl, this person was like, I have fan fiction I want to read. And Trixie and Katya were like, please don't. And she said, oh, it'll only be really quick. And then went on for 5 minutes of this 15-minute portion of the panel that there was not a lot of time to do that, So, like, people sat there and just groaned and cringed, I assume. Which, it's understandable where this person might have gotten the idea to do this, for people that aren't fans of RuPaul's Drag Race or drag queens or anything. Once Trixie and Katya did do a reading of one of these explicit fanfictions and said in the video to send them some fanfiction of themselves, but that was quite a long time ago, and so they would probably assume people had forgotten about that. But, especially if they didn't in this case, when they said, don't do that, don't read this explicit fanfiction out loud in front of an audience, our audience especially, you would think the person would back off and be like, okay, sorry. But they kept on. So don't be that person. If a musician or anybody that's hosting a Q&A says don't do something, if it makes them uncomfortable, if it would make yourself uncomfortable if it happened to you, I would suggest not doing that. So moving on. Number 6. Don't ask/say something just for the sake of being acknowledged by the musician. And that's just simple matter. The fact is, it's just wasted time in everybody's eyes. Like, maybe I'm a bit of a mean person, but I don't think an interview or a Q&A is the place for somebody to tell a musician or somebody that, that they mean absolutely the most to you or something, which it might be the case, but save that for something like a meet and greet where it's a bit of a more personalized experience. Just my opinion on that, but whatever. Number 7, I feel like this is another easy one, but if you're able to, just be sure to say thank you. Like, if there's a signing afterwards or meet and greet situation, just take a quick moment to say thanks. It's easy as that. I don't know. Oh, finally, we've reached the end. But I'm gonna start this one off with a bit of another anecdote. So do you remember the one episode of The Simpsons where Otto's driving his school bus as normal, and he's like high off his ass or something, and he drives by and sees Metallica with a flat tire or something, and he gets off the bus and is like, wow, oh my god, you're Metallica, that's so awesome, hey, remember this? He holds out his lighter, like flashes the devil horns and something, and shouts, Metallica rules! And ridiculously enough, everybody in the band remembers that this one dude flashing his lighter, shouting Metallica rules at a concert years and years ago. And so that's just gonna provide a bit of context for this one last tip I have, which is to say, don't ask a musician if they remember you from one particular thing a million years ago. I didn't write this down in my notes, but it just occurred to me. A, it would just be very uncomfortable for everybody if, like, they didn't, which honestly they probably don't, but we'll get to that in a second. B, if they don't, but don't want to hurt your feelings, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, yeah, totally, thanks, But honestly, if they do remember you, they'll ask you if you're at a particular thing without you having to say, remember me? You know, unless you've been to a million meet and greets and shows in the front row, or literally saved them from the pyres of Mount Vesuvius or something, they most likely won't remember you. Especially in the case of popular bands like Avenged Sevenfold or something. They see a million faces every day, and sorry to say, yours isn't gonna stand out. And that's what makes that piece from The Simpsons hilarious, because there's no way that Metallica would remember one dude saying Metallica rules a million years ago. You know why? Because everybody says Metallica rules every day of their life. It's just a matter of fact. So now, this whole list of things isn't to say that I haven't done any of this myself in situations, and it's not to say that anytime that anybody else has done any of this stuff is an unforgivable sin or something. Maybe in the case of that one person at RuPaul's Drag Con, that's the only exception, but you know, it's like, just kind of take this in mind for the future moving forward, and to make the Q&A experience a lot better for everybody in the end. So, with that said, thank you so much for listening to Lovely Talks Heavy. If you enjoyed this episode, please refer a friend. It would mean a lot to me. Keep up with me on social media, on Twitter, on Tumblr, Instagram, YouTube, and Mixcloud. I am simply LovelyMetalhead. There's no space between Lovely nor Metalhead, so. If you have feedback or suggestions for episode ideas, please feel free to leave it at any of these social media outlets that I just mentioned. Thank you for listening, and until next time, you stay brutal.